Thanks so much for being here, spending your Sunday with us. Like I said, my name is Bradley Hamilton, and excited to be here, excited about this series. I know we're calling it Dumb Things Smart Christians Believe, which is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek, but I think there's some truth to this. And I'm really excited for what we're gonna talk about for the next few weeks, because I just think there are some things that unintentionally we have maybe picked up along the way. Maybe it was misinterpreted or misquoted. Maybe someone said it and we just sort of picked it up. But there have just been certain things that, again, unintentionally, we might be believing that might not be in the Bible. Or maybe Jesus didn't say it. Or maybe Jesus qualified something about it that we tend to leave off. And so my hope is that over the next few weeks, this would actually be very helpful, because maybe there has been some thinking that can actually be undone and lead to healing and lead to some of the things that you've been praying for actually breaking through for the first time. And so there are just certain things, again, we picked up along the way, and we just sort of believed, even though we might not should believe it. In fact, any Star Wars fans in the room? Any Star Wars fans? Okay. I'm a recent convert. So my oldest, we went to Disney World, and he was like, "Who's that, Dad?" And I was like, "I don't know. Mask Man." That's all I got. He's like, "Is he good or bad?" I was like, "Let's go with bad. Looks kind of bad." All right. So I didn't know anything, and so now I've been catching up, watching all of the movies. I've been like living in that the last 3 years, and so all the nerd fans in the room, we can talk now. This is gonna be great. But there's something that watching for the first time, I didn't realize. Do you know that Darth Vader doesn't say, "Luke, I'm your father"? Did you know this? Go back and watch, I'm serious. He just says, "I'm your father," right? Leaves Luke off. But yet the thing that we quote and say all the time, we just sort of got from nowhere, right? Any Disney fans in the room? Star Wars not your speed, but you like classic Disney. In Snow White, when you approach the mirror, what do you say? Mirror, mirror on the wall, right? Do you know that's not correct? It's actually magic mirror on the wall. I know, they got that wrong. They need to change that. We're correct, right? And then most people believe that the Monopoly man has a monocle, but he doesn't. I'm serious, you can Google this, okay? Not right now, let me finish my message, but afterward, go do it. I mean, I'm serious. There are things that are happening all around the world that we just, think somewhere along the way we've picked up, and the same can be true for religion. Someone could say something, or there could be a phrase that sort of catches on, or a phrase that people say when they don't know what to say, and if we're not careful, what can begin to happen is we will begin to base our beliefs off of something that might not be in the Bible. Or we then base our actions off of something, and that can do some big damage. And so what we want to do over the next couple of weeks is we're going to look at some of these phrases. And in fact, the one I'm going to talk about today, as soon as I put it up there, you're going to be like, wait, that's not in the Bible? And so just don't leave yet. Hang with me for a second. We'll get there. But here's what I want to talk about this morning. This phrase, forgive and forget. Forgive and forget. Often said, if you're dealing with hurt from somebody and you're not sure what to do, and a well-meaning, well-intentioned friend just says, well, just forgive and forget. And you're going, wait, that's not in there? Like, isn't forgiveness one of the core tenets of Jesus? And you're absolutely right. In fact, and we miss this all the time, this is so big, it was absolutely countercultural to talk about forgiveness. When Jesus talked about forgiveness, this idea in the ancient world was absolutely unimaginable, because it's not how anything operated. In fact, that term, eye for an eye, was a legal term. Tooth for a tooth. They carried out justice. Whatever was done to you, justice would be fulfilled if that thing was then done back. And not just legally. This was a cultural thing. So in other words, if someone insulted you or insulted your family or hit you, you were obliged, because everything was about power. Everything was about the honor of your family. And so in order to assert power, to not show you were weak, to not bring more insult onto your family, you were told to fight back. You were told to repay whatever was done to you. And so if someone hit you in the street, you were supposed to hit back to not show that you were weak, to not bring insult onto your family. This is how the world operated. Everything operated around retaliation. It was a retaliation culture. And so this is what we miss. Jesus shows up on the scene and goes, turn the other cheek. Love your enemies. Love the ones who aren't for you. I mean, this was completely revolutionary. In a world that was all around retaliation, Jesus seemed to be talking about something brand new. In fact, I love this in Matthew 18, so we're gonna be this morning. There's a conversation he's having with his disciples. And disciples literally is translated to students. So these were guys who were following after him, trying to learn from him, figure out what he was all about, taking notes on what he believed and how he saw the world. And when he would talk about this idea of forgiveness, they could not get it. They could not fathom it. It just was completely opposite to everything they've known, everything about their culture, everything that they felt, because everything should be retaliated against. And so here's what he does. He sits them down, he's talking with them about this idea. And don't miss this, it's completely revolutionary. He says, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault between the two of you. So this term brother and sister is really important because what he's talking about is someone who is in close relationship, someone who is in your gathering. That he uses the term in a minute, ecclesia, which we now say is church, but it's a gathering of Christ's followers. So as you guys are disciples of me, following after me, learning from me, and you're gathering together, if you have someone within that gathering and the two of you, if they sin against you. Now sin, Jesus would say, it's usually about all this list. When Jesus showed up on the scene, he would say that sin would be anything that would hurt other people. That now the way that you operate with God is actually your horizontal relationships. And so the way you treat people is now how you would operate in your relationship with God. And so anything that you would do that would not be God's best, that would hurt you or that would hurt other people would be sin. So what he's saying is, as you guys figure this out together, Christ followers, as you are disciples of me, learning together, gathering together, you might hurt one another. In fact, maybe you've experienced this. You might not agree on everything. You might have some issues bubble up. You might disagree with the person to your right or to your left. They might do something wrong to you. You might do something wrong to them. And so he's giving them operating orders for if you guys are in a gathering together, brothers and sisters, and one of them makes a mistake or insults you or hurts you, go to them, just the two of you. And they said, Jesus, this isn't how anything operates. This isn't how we're supposed to operate. It's supposed to be public. You're supposed to show everyone that they are in the wrong, I am in the right, I have power, they need to get theirs, I need to get mine. That's how the world works. And so if we disagree, you're saying just talk to them in private? Hit them in private, just talk to them in private? So you want me to just go to them, talk to them, and then make sure I'm doing it in a way that avoids gossip? And avoids public shaming? And avoids other people finding out and thinking negative about this person and knowing that I'm right? They couldn't get it. He says, yeah, you're gonna do what takes the extra mile, what's difficult, what's tough, what means swallowing pride, what means not caring about what they repay you with and what you get. But you are going to try, and this gets to the heart of what he wants. He doesn't want retaliation. The goal for us would not be retaliation. The goal for him. And they're going, okay, this is it, right? This is it. Okay, if they won't listen, now we hit them. Like now this is it. Sorry, so that if they listen to you, I skipped one, you have won them over. So there we see the restoration, not retaliation. And then he says, but if they will not listen, they're going, okay, good, because that was so much extra work, and now I'm ready. What do we do if they don't listen? This is where we make sure everybody knows that they're in the wrong, everybody knows we're in the right. This is where it all happens. If they do not listen, take one or two others along. Not done. So that every matter may be established by the testimony of two or three witnesses. It says, nope, restoration's not over just because you didn't see eye to eye on the first time. What you need to do is continue to go the extra mile. Continue to put in the work. Bring maybe a third party who's close to the situation who can help maybe both see the ways in that they're wrong. Maybe both see how to work at this together. And it's tough, and it's messy, and it takes time, and it's the extra effort. And they're going, Jesus, can't we just repay them eye for eye? It's so much easier. And then he continues, but if they refuse to listen, going, okay, now, got it, Jesus. Here's where we hit them. There has to be the moment where we fight back. This is finally it. It's been too much work. It's been too much effort. That's a lot. I get it, Jesus. Okay, we'll do those things. We'll have a couple meetings. But then it's time to make sure we retaliate. He says, nope. If they refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And again, we think of churches today as what this is, but this was a gathering, ecclesia, a group of disciples following after Jesus together. He goes, if there's something going on, there's someone hurting one another, you need to figure it out, but you might need to bring in the gathering to figure out what's going on. Still not public. Still not shaming in the street. Still not go to your other buddy and tell him about what this person did because they're on the outside and they need to judge this person and see that you're right. And if you can get enough people seeing that you're right, then you've really done it. None of that. He is trying to paint a picture of the extra mile that he wants his followers to go to the best they can reconcile with one another, whatever's going on. And not hurt and not shame, but to reconcile. And he says, and then if it doesn't work, then treat them as a pagan or a tax collector. And they're going, great, thank you, Jesus, because we hate those guys. And so this is where now we are doing it, okay? We're gonna treat them like they are a pagan and they are a tax collector. The problem is, a little bit ago, Jesus said that we should love pagans and tax collectors and treat them with worth and value and dignity. And so what he's laying out to them is the relationship might change. The way you see them shouldn't. And the way you treat them shouldn't. And they're looking at Jesus, how did he treat pagans and tax collectors? Well, some of them were pagans and tax collectors. And he brought them in. And he put them first. And he loved on them. And his point is that even if the relationship changes, the way you treat people who are made in the image of God doesn't. And so unlike a world who would pay bad behavior with bad behavior, we are supposed to just never retaliate. Never hate. Never repay bad behavior for bad behavior. In fact, let me just stop here. Because if Christians would just do this, and let's throw out the rest of it for a minute. I like it all, it's really good. If they would just do this, I think our world would change. If Christ's followers decided that even if there are enemies, even though they don't deserve it, even though everyone needs to know that they're wrong and I'm right, and even though I've got to retaliate and keep what's mine, and if Christians would just decide that time and time again, even if relationships change, even if the relationship has to shift, I will choose to believe the best, love the most, and treat them with dignity and not retaliation. I think we look different. I think some of the issues that come up might look different. And even if people weren't sure about Christianity, they would want to be neighbors with one. And they would want to work alongside of them. And they would want their daughter to marry one. And these were Jesus' original marching orders for his followers who would take his message into an onlooking world. That we wouldn't operate how anyone else operates. We wouldn't operate what made sense. We would simply decide that we are going to forgive. But it's tough. And this goes against maybe everything that we feel. And it was for his listeners. In fact, still his disciples cannot figure this out. And so I love it. Peter, he often just kind of steps up to say the first thing. And he steps up and he goes, okay, Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, but how many times should I forgive my brother and sister? I love this. Up to 7 times? Like, okay, Jesus, that's a lot of work. And that's a lot of effort. And this could have just been solved on the street real quick. But we're doing all these meetings and all these things. And like, how many times, okay? How many times? 7? Like, that's got to be the max number, Jesus. Because surely, surely it can't be 7. And then Jesus replies, and you might know it. I tell you, not 7 times, but 70 times 7 times. And his point was to make an irrationally large number. To go, Peter, here's what you're not seeing. This idea of forgiveness, this idea of loving your enemies, this idea of not treating people how they deserve to be treated, this might be an ongoing, everyday, every relationship, moment by moment work and effort for your entire life. And that's my call for my church. And that's my call for my people. That no matter how the world operates, that no matter who hurts you or takes from you, that we would be a people that continue to forgive and continue to treat all people as they are made in the image of God, and as things come up between you, and as you have differing opinions, as God's people, the onlooking world would stop and realize there is something about them that is dedicated to reconciliation as well as they can. And they don't operate how everyone else does in retaliation. That was his marching orders. Now, a few things I want to clarify, because the statement that he didn't say is forgive and forget. And I get the intention behind that statement. The intention behind it is, yes, you've been hurt, move on. And I understand all that. The problem is what can happen sometimes when we sort of add things into important pieces of Jesus' statements is that it can unintentionally cause some other effects. And it can unintentionally cause some harm. And I think there might even be people in the room that when it comes to this idea of being told forgive and forget, there are some pieces that you have been hurt by that Jesus didn't actually say. And so what I want to do over the next just couple of minutes is I want to give you 3 clarifying statements around what forgiveness is and around what it isn't, okay? The first one, forgiveness does not mean ignoring. Forgiveness doesn't mean ignore it. I think sometimes, we say forgive and forget, and I understand the intention, but what we might unintentionally be telling people is just to stay silent, ignore it, let it go. And that is not what Jesus said. Just his first statement, if they sin against you, go to them. Talk to them about this. If there's something in between a relationship that's causing harm or causing an issue, you actually need to step into a little bit of conflict and bring it up with them. Like you might have seen this happen in relationships. Psychologists actually call this toxic forgiveness. What happens is we just think, okay, I'm just gonna move past it, I'm not gonna bring it up, and we're just gonna ignore it. And we think that's gonna help the relationship, especially because you're going, I don't like conflict, I don't wanna step into it, whatever. But what you're actually doing is harming the relationship, because what begins to happen is that slight will build in your heart, and then it happens again and again. They don't even know that they're doing it, so they just keep doing it again and again. And then you have all of this resentment built up, and then now everything they do is through this lens. And pretty soon you'll see this relationship will erode, and you will grow unattached. And I think Jesus was so ahead of his time to know that that's what would take place if we don't operate like this. And so he's not saying just ignore and let it go and let it keep happening. In fact, for the sake of relationships, he is saying do something. It just doesn't look like getting them back for it. It doesn't look like talking behind their back. It doesn't look like just getting angry or posting on social media. It doesn't look like any of that. It looks like going directly to them and trying to seek reconciliation as his follower. And so what I know is that unintentionally there have been streams of Christianity who have said the term forgive and forget. And it has allowed abuse to continue happening. And it has allowed people to feel like they shouldn't speak up in the name of Jesus. And I just want to encourage you to read about almost anything else that Jesus talks about, because he was the forefront voice of speaking up for the oppressed. He was the forefront voice about speaking up for injustice that he saw. He was the forefront voice that all people had worth and value. In a culture where women and children did not have value, certain races did not have value, certain statuses did not have value, he said that all people are made in the image of God and have worth and they matter. And so if you've unintentionally heard from the church that you just need to stay silent, that is not the marching orders of Jesus. And we cannot want retaliation toward people, but sometimes we have to go. Sometimes we have to speak up. The second one is forgiveness doesn't mean trust. And this is a big one. Because we are called to forgive everyone. You will not find it in scripture that we are to trust everyone. Trust is a totally different thing. Trust is something that can be eroded based off of bad decisions from someone else. Trust can be destroyed based off of what someone does to you. And that same trust needs to be rebuilt before entering back into a relationship. Sometimes I think we just think that because we're being a good Christ follower, we just need to continue to blindly hand everyone our trust, even though the history and the past has been to destroy it. Jesus isn't saying that. I think that there are some, again, it's why he said some relationships need to change and some need to shift. It doesn't mean that you treat them as less than. It doesn't mean that you grow retaliation in your heart toward them, but sometimes you can love people in the image of God from a distance. And you can love people in the image of God and still not allow them to step over a boundary time and time and time again when it is hurting you and robbing from you. And so sometimes, again, I just feel for the people who go, because I'm not trusting it, I haven't forgiven. And can I just tell you, if that is you, that is not the case. In fact, by you deciding not to just blindly give your trust again or blindly step into a relationship in the same form that it was before, you may be doing the thing that Jesus would have you do most. He says to remove revenge, not remove wisdom. In fact, he's telling his disciples just earlier in the same book, and he's sending them out because he knew that pretty soon he was going to die. He would be publicly executed. And all of the people who were following him would kind of scatter and hide and give up because gods don't die. But then 3 days later, hundreds of eyewitnesses began to run back into the streets. And they were proclaiming to the same people who were threatening their lives that they were scared of. Now they're saying, we don't care if you take our lives. We believe this because we saw him die and we saw him again. And so now this movement begins to spread as hundreds of eyewitnesses begin to verify. And they're going, he is who he said he is. He is God. And as they're spreading their movement, Jesus would tell them, hey, pretty soon you guys are going to be the ones, you disciples, you will be the ones that take my message, that take my heart, that take all of the things that I've just said, and you will become the ones who usher in the new kingdom into the world. And here's how he sends them out. Very encouraging. He says, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. I'm sending you out as sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Kind of a strange thing to say about Christians, like you're snakes. But don't miss what he's saying here. You are going out into a world where not everyone is for you. Where not everyone has clear motives. Where not everyone has decided to live with the same integrity that you are choosing to live with. And so as you go out, don't blindly give away trust. Snakes were saying is survivalist and cunning, and so he's saying in some sense, you've got to be aware. You've got to be in some sense on the lookout. But then don't miss it, he partners it with the second part, to be as innocent as doves. In other words, there is a way to walk through the world and be aware of what's happening while also keep your authenticity, while also keeping your integrity, while also remaining sure that you are going to act in kindness and love, even if you have to be aware. And so we forgive everyone. It does not mean that you need to trust everyone. And I just need to say for some in the room, it's a weird takeaway from a forgiveness message, but you might need to actually set a boundary with someone, or you might need to step away from someone and not feel bad about it. Because you're doing the wise thing that Jesus would actually call you to do. Doesn't mean that you're gonna have a heart of retaliation and hope that they get theirs. But you can change the relationship to where you aren't continuing to be hurt by someone who has no desire to rebuild trust. And forgiveness is not trust. Lastly, forgiveness doesn't mean an erased memory. And this one, I just hear so often, because what I think this does, forgive and forget, is I think it creates a really cruel and unfair expectation that because you haven't forgotten what was done to you, you somehow haven't forgiven. And the two aren't the same. God is not going, hey, just forget and then just don't even think about it ever again. Don't hurt, don't feel that, don't ever get triggered by it. He's not calling us to be inhuman. Forgiveness doesn't mean you will ever necessarily forget it. And really, your brain's doing what it's supposed to do. Your brain's doing what God wired it to do, I believe, which is when we are hurt, it says, don't make that decision the same way again. So it's actually trying to prevent you from future hurt. And so to just hope that things are erased is kind of impossible, but also it probably isn't helpful for you. Now, I do think there absolutely situations where through counseling or through tools, maybe there are some things that are too triggering or too overwhelming, and there may need to be a lot of work done to work on when those things happen and tools for when it takes place, especially when there's been trauma. All of that, I think, is so, so important. But if you are feeling like you're not a good Christ follower because you still every now and then feel something, that is not the call of Jesus. It is okay to hurt. It is okay to grieve. It is okay to feel the weight of things in this broken world that have been done to us. And even after so much work, you might still get triggered, you might still feel the pain, and that doesn't mean that somehow you are broken in how you are following after Jesus. He asks you to work to a place in your heart where you don't retaliate against that person or feel hatred toward that person or feel like they need to get what's coming to them so that you can be repaid by that person. That is what he's calling us to, but he is not saying that if you feel hurt that you are somehow less than. And I just hope for someone in the room that just frees you up a little bit to go, I can feel this overwhelming feeling that I'm having, and still I can forgive. And they're not in contradiction to each other. This is difficult. This is not easy. Everything in our body just wants to repay what was paid to us. In so many ways, culture is still there. And yet Jesus is saying this will set you apart. This is how you'll be different. This is how the onlooking world will stop and it not make sense. And they're still not getting it. So Jesus goes, you know what? I'm gonna sum it all up in this last parable. So he gives a parable, which is like a story that's using metaphor to kind of paint a point. He does it all the time with the disciples because they're just not connecting the dots. And he goes, here's what God's like. He tells this story about this servant who owes his master 20 years worth of wages. 20 years worth of wages. So just an impossible to pay back debt. And he says that he comes to the master and the master forgives him. Removes the debt. Didn't do anything to deserve it. Didn't do anything to earn it. He just takes it away. And that forgiven person walks out, finds someone who owes them 1 day's worth of wages, and makes them repay. He's going, Peter, guys, this seems so impossible, and here's why I'm asking you to do it. Not because they deserve it, but because you didn't deserve it. Not because they've earned your forgiveness, but because you have forgiveness, because you did not earn yours. And he's looking at everything, every mistake, every misstep, everything we've done, and sure, they've hurt you too, but God has seen every single thing that you have done and said, it is forgiven, it is repaid. Thank God he is not a God of retaliation for what we deserve. And he goes, so go do that. In the midst of struggling with one another and having different opinions and not seeing eye to eye and making mistakes, what if you just went to one another? What if you tried for reconciliation? And what if even when it's not possible, you still loved and honored and served? It'll change the world. And so I'm gonna speak to several groups in the room. I think there's some who've been chasing unrealistic expectations. And you've just been down on yourself because you feel like you can't forget, and that means that you haven't moved on, and that's not the case. And I do hope that you feel some freedom today to go, the work I need to do is to make sure I don't wanna retaliate in my heart against them, even if I'm still hurting. And that's okay. And you have a church family here that is gonna hurt with you and not tell you to forget it. To help you process through it. There's some in the room that you've been avoiding speaking up, or you've been trying to trust when really you shouldn't. You shouldn't trust. And again, strange takeaway from a forgiveness message. But maybe your next step is to step out in some wisdom and change a relationship, put a boundary up in a relationship. Again, doesn't mean that you want to retaliate, doesn't mean that you hurt or shame or gossip or any of those things, but the relationship might need to change because of the trust that's been eroded. And then there are others in the room, you're struggling to forgive. And if you were to be honest, you're going, yeah, Bradley, I'm not yet to a place to where I don't want retaliation. And I'm still trying to figure out what it means and what it takes to kind of get my heart in this place where I'm not filled with this anger and where these things aren't completely overwhelming me. And I just want you to know you're in a safe place to process through that too. In fact, how we want to end this morning is a little bit different than what we normally do. And we just want to make some of our staff and elders available, and they're going to come to the front here in just a minute. And during this next worship song, we just want to be available to pray with you if you'd like it. If you're kind of in that spot where you're just overwhelmed and don't really know where to go next, they would love just to be available. And you can tell them the situation, or you cannot. You can just say, just pray for me. They would just love to do that. But we just want you to know that you're not alone. And we want you to know that it's tough figuring this out together. But that's what we're committed to as his people. So let me pray for us as our staff comes up, and we'll have some time of prayer and worship. God, we just thank you for forgiving our debt. God, you see it all, and you don't retaliate. You offer grace and love, a second chance. And God, I can't even begin to imagine the hurts in this room. I can't begin to imagine what's been done and the devastation that has caused. And God, ultimately, I pray you would help us. Help us not just ignore. Help us maybe figure out where boundaries need to be and where your wisdom would lead us. God, ultimately do the tough work in our hearts to figure out how retaliation isn't our default. And God, we know that's a process. And God, I'm just so thankful for a church that's willing to wrestle with that together. So God, over these next few moments, we just pray. We ask you to do what only you can do in our hearts and our lives. And God, we worship you. So your name I pray.